Good evening, and welcome to Town Administrator's Report. I'm David Wass Jr., and with me is our Town Administrator, Steve Mayo. Steve, welcome.
Thank you, David. How are you?
Good. How's the summer been? We've been 2 months since the last show.
2 months, and it's been hot and
Humid.
steamy and humid and
The everlasting bonfire.
everlasting. The climate change is here, and if the audience knew what we were talking about before the cameras come on, we're talking about growlers of beer.
Yeah.
You can tell it's summertime, and we need to get cooled off somehow. So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, but we are going to talk about a fairly serious subject, and as a preface, three people here in town and one from Melrose, Bill Chetwin, Mark Luca, Ed O'Connell from Melrose, and myself have been talking for several months now about what is becoming more and more an important subject, and that is the return of civics to our educational programs. And you and I are both old enough to remember when that was a part of the curriculum from 5th grade on.
And sorely missing today.
Very sorely missing today at two levels. One being the general lack of understanding and appreciation for how our system works. And we see this whether it's in elections, town meeting,
hearings, general hearings. Yeah.
And we had an extreme example of that recently at town council.
Yeah.
Over the kiosks, and the behavior, I must say, was frighteningly bad. And it has caused a lot of conversation within town, which is actually a good thing. But at some point after we were in school, civics was dropped from the curriculum.
Yeah, it's too bad, and I think that what a lot of people think the way that you act or should act is the way that people are acting nationally.
Mm-hmm.
And that is nothing farther from the truth.
Mm-hmm.
As you and I both know,
Mm-hmm.
for our system, our democracy to work, there has to be clean and open and respectful debate within a framework. And I think really it's sorely missing. So this is a great topic for today.
And you know, on two levels, one is it doesn't seem like we can have a conversation about any subject, and I'm gonna limit this to Wakefield right now, without people going at each other.
Yes.
And it's important for people to be able to converse that are on opposite sides of a subject, converse with a positive attitude, and maybe come away with a better understanding of both sides of the other person's point of view.
Absolutely.
And a good example, and I'll point this out, and Mark will kill me for this the next time we meet, but I don't necessarily always agree with Mark Luca, but I've always liked and respected Mark Luca, and we've always been able to have a conversation without either being petty toward the other.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You know? And we may not come away with a changed mind, but there's still that mutual respect. And this is the great thing about this foursome that's been talking about this over the last few months, is that we don't all necessarily agree with everything, but at least we've tried to build something and hope that it will see some measure of fruit.
I know, and since you brought up Mark Luca's name, Mark Luca is a regular at town meeting.
Yes, he is, for many years.
For many years, and he does get up on many of the issues. He speaks his mind. It's always with respect, and whether the position of the town council is on one side and he's on the other, it's respectful, or and vice versa. So I certainly greatly appreciate, when he gets up, even if it's not necessarily something that I have to support at the meeting or I'm supporting. But again, that's what democracy is all about.
Right, right. And at the end of the day, finding the best course, the things that come back to thought are, and these are examples I use a lot when I talk about this, is you think back to Tip O'Neill who was a firebrand liberal,
Right.
and President Reagan,
Right.
who was just the opposite.
Opposite.
And yet they could sit down together and say, how can we find middle ground that benefits the greatest number of Americans? I'm not going to get everything I want. You're not going to get everything you want, but we'll benefit the majority of people and have something rather than what we have today of nothing.
Quite an answer for everybody.
Yeah.
Quite an example
Yeah.
for everybody.
Yeah. And you think back to Ted Kennedy and some of the Republicans that he dealt with over
Right,
the years.
that he co-sponsored bills with over the years.
Absolutely.
Orrin Hatch and Ted Kennedy, probably as opposite as you could be,
Yep.
yet worked together and were able to break bread together and put really good legislation
Right.
together for the entire country. So.
And at the end of the day, have a beer together.
And at the end of the day, have a beer together, or a growler together, as we were talking about before. All comes full circle.
So this is actually on two levels. We had a meeting with Superintendent Smith and the new superintendent,
Superintendent Lyons, yeah.
Lyons, and Doug Lyons, and they had already started to put a plan in place for the Wakefield school system, which I think will begin this year. But at the same time also, the state is trying to do something with, I have in front of me Senate Bill 2631, which was recently enacted by both houses, mandating civics education in the curriculum. It did go to Governor Baker, and Governor Baker returned it with amendments, which, to his credit, improved the bill.
Yeah, they're not draconian. They're not trying to kibosh the bill at all.
No. What he put in there, and I say to his credit, is he wanted the bill to specifically state that it was non-partisan,
Yeah.
which I think is important.
Right. I love the name of the bill, too. An act to promote and enhance civic education.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so hopefully this will get back to the House and Senate. They're out of session right now. They have no plans to come back before the end of the year. So if it isn't reenacted by the end of the year, they will have to start again after January
Right.
2nd.
I think there's a lot of momentum here to put this through. I hope there is.
It's sorely needed.
Yeah.
And hopefully we can once again lead the way nationally and see it, because the discourse right now is coarse, it is inflammatory, and it's not getting us anywhere.
No, unfortunately isn't. But to bring us back to the bill, what I like about it, there's a lot that I like about it, and I've read it a number of times at this point. But it also, tied to this bill, there also was a funding piece, which has been lacking. A lot of things that get passed up there, and because there's no funding tied to it, and it's becomes another local mandate,
Right.
to the towns, whether it's cleaning the streets around the lake or developing and implementing curriculum in the schools. There's no funding for it. This seems to have some funding attached to it, which I think is really good. And it's a separate fund, and it's a revolving fund.
Right.
So that money can be utilized year after year as they put into it, and won't just all sweep back to the general fund.
It isn't
so
just added to Chapter 70
exactly.
or anything
It's
like
a completely separate item.
Yeah.
And I think it's a little bit interesting as you read between the lines to it. I think a portion of this funding is going to come from the gaming fees. But I think there's a joke and some poetic license there somewhere for that. But I think it's really good. But it has great stuff. It has money in it, professional development for the teachers that will implement in the schools. Curriculum development, so they can help develop their curriculum and have something that is statewide standard on it. And there's going to be credits for collaborating with other towns, which I think is fabulous. A lot of times, a lot of the funding that comes out from the state almost forces you into a silo.
Right.
And this is a little bit different than that. And I love that it's going to require projects at the middle school level. I almost said junior high, bringing me back to my, my youth.
I do the same thing even now. I have that problem.
And the high school level. So I think I think there's a lot that's really good in this bill.
Yeah.
To talk about it. And hopefully it's going to educate and help promote civics at a younger level, and hopefully they can bring it home, and talk to their parents about it, and talk around the kitchen table, and they can talk about, hey, we learned this in school today about civics and how this works and how that works and how it works in our state and in our local level. I think it's just fabulous. I really do.
And the nice thing is, in this area, we have resources that can be used to enhance that curriculum. I don't know how many people out in our audience are aware of the Edward M. Kennedy Institute for the U.S. Senate, which is next door to the JFK Library. And one of the things that they have provided in that building is a full-size replica of the Senate chamber in Washington. And they use that to bring school kids in to debate different issues that have come up over the course of our history. Whether it be the origins of the Civil War or civil rights or Brown versus Board of Education,
Excellent items for them to talk about.
Absolutely. And by putting themselves in the place of those legislators, maybe coming away with a better understanding of not only how it works, but what happened and why it was why it went the direction it did.
Yeah.
It's if you haven't seen the Institute, it's worth a day trip.
Both. The day trip, and actually that's a nice day for both the JFK Library and Ted Kennedy.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely a fabulous day.
Absolutely. Even though they are separate entities. Most people don't realize they are separate entities, but they are on the UMass Boston
campus.
And they're just within walking distance of each other, and they're great resources to learn from.
Yeah.
So the hope here is that we will start this ball rolling in Wakefield
This
and
year. Yeah.
it's actually starting next month, September 22nd. If I remember right, it's a Saturday. There's going to be a roundtable at the Savings Bank Theater at the high school, and the invitees are going to be town council, school committee, different other people around Wakefield, and hopefully bring everyone together to talk about the need for civics, and then have some breakout sessions
I think it's great.
to
It's a great
actually
day.
put some concrete things in. How can we improve things here in Wakefield, and especially discussions here in Wakefield, because the discussions have gotten, for lack of a better
Yeah.
term, poisonous.
Yeah, and we've seen that happening over the last few years, and I know we're gonna talk about Wakefield, but that's happening everywhere locally, so it's not.
But we have to
just us.
focus
But we're
on
gonna
our
focus
community
here,
first.
But we're not. What I like about this bill is that they really got into some of the specifics of what they wanted this bill to include in civics. And number one, history of the United States of America. I can imagine there'd be very little argument about that. To include the Constitution of the United States, including the Bill of Rights, Declaration of Independence, which is a great document to read, and really how carefully that was written. The Constitution of the State of Massachusetts. Okay.
Which, by the way, was the basis for the national Constitution.
Absolutely. Local history and government. The function and composition of the branches of local, state, and federal government. That's a great topic, because will often go to school groups and speak about that now, and there is a lot of confusion about that. So I think that's great.
Separation of powers.
Separation of powers. The development of skills to access, analyze, and evaluate written and digital media as it relates to history and civics. Not only teaching them about, the process, but how to work with the process.
Right. Critical
Fabulous.
thinking.
Absolutely. Community diversity and historical trends in voter registration and civic participation relative to disenfranchised voter populations. Very important in today's day and age. And also, as part of the bill, it is required that there's a voter challenge part of it. So there actually is in the bill requirements that in the high school there is the ability to sign up to register to vote, which, and I think that is something that should be made much easier. And you have kids in high school, and we talk about when they get their driver's license, they're automatically, well, not everybody gets their driver's license
Right.
at a young age. Some of them wait. So this is a great way of, again, increasing the base of people that vote. Opportunities to identify and debate issues relative to power, economic status, and get this, common good in democracy. This is really where you really get down
Right.
into where the rubber meets the road.
Where
on
do we
this.
hear that terms like that
Yeah.
anymore?
You don't. I think it's just fabulous. It also talks about etiquette and correct use of the flag, and I think that's a great discussion to talk about, and the importance of the electoral process. There's also something and as I said, I've had a lot of been blessed to have times to go in and speak to the students at the high school on a number of occasions, and a lot of them they want to talk about local government, but they also turn into almost, some of them are so brilliant. International monetary policy. What does the Affordable Care Act mean? What does the reversal of the Affordable Care Act mean? What does that mean here? And you can see these young people.
Global trade. How does that affect
Yeah, how does
us?
that affect us? Tariffs. What does tariffs mean? What are tariffs?
Yeah.
Things that they really
Which
haven't
is
heard.
something we haven't heard a lot about for a very, very long time.
And this is all part of that. And one thing I did like is that, and I hope that this still comes true, is that they are encouraging, and the school committee's done a great job about this, about having youth membership on boards. The Commission for Civil Rights in Wakefield, Human Rights Commission in Wakefield, has been very good about having student liaison.
We have a student, no, not even a liaison.
member.
We have an actual student commissioner who is appointed by the superintendent. Our current commissioner is Talat Aman.
Yep.
And Talat, who is involved in numerous groups in the high school, has been a wonderful resource to the commission, and we've been very blessed to have him. And luckily, he came to us as a sophomore.
Right, so he's grown up with this, and
He's going to do 3 years with us before he goes on to college. He has one more year
and
left.
destined for great things, I think, that young man.
I'm
as
sure.
I've spoken to him a number of times. But this is going to really, and under the bill, the Secretary of State, by December 1st, is supposed to disseminate info regarding youth leadership
Right.
positions on boards to the different cities and towns in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And I think that's great, because I think we do struggle with how do you incorporate that. I think the school committee has a natural flow to it. I think the town council over the years, and I've thought about this, and I'm kind of really happy that this is something that could help me a little bit with this, is that how do we bring in the next generation, and how do we really work with them? How do we indoctrinate them and help them, and have them help us to see things from a different view? And we've done a lot with the youth action teams and what have you.
Sure.
On project basis. But I think it would be great to have something like this, and I'm hoping that there are some guidelines of how do you do that, how do we make it fair, do we do a revolving, do we do it for 6 months, do we do it for a year, because you want to engage as many young people as you can.
Sure.
So, or do you have a number of them, and they work together so they all are learning
But the
at
other
same
great
time?
thing, what we're seeing, not just in Wakefield but across the country, is that given a lot of the issues that we're dealing with right now, the young people are coming to the front.
Yes.
And they're coming to the front in ways beyond what we did during Vietnam, during the 60s. And hopefully they won't drop it along the way,
Yeah.
that they'll keep the momentum going. And it would be great to see. But the fact that they are getting involved, the fact that they are speaking up in the ways that they are, is nothing short of fantastic.
Yeah, I am certainly looking so forward to what they do bring on this. And I remember being in Wakefield Memorial High School, and a candidate for office, and I forget what the office was. It was a local office. But that wasn't what was important. What was important is he came and he talked about the importance of one vote and how throughout history things have changed, have hinged upon one vote
Right.
here. And he was talking about the electoral process. Of course, in the Supreme Court, we know one vote makes a big difference.
Especially
but-
right now.
especially right now. But he was talking about whether to impeach, when to convict Andrew Johnson after, and there was, it was almost a lot of it was from JFK's Profiles in Courage book, that there was one, member of the House that voted no, they were surprised that, but probably was the right thing at the time, Profile in Courage, but probably ruined him forever. But I forget the name of it now, of that representative, but
Andrew
it
Johnson's reputation is never
is
recovered.
never good, but it might have not been good to have him indicted
Right.
at that time. So I think it's really I think it's a great movement. They have a lot of important things that they need to do at the State House level. It's not just the budget. There's a lot of other things looking at. I think this is a great step, maybe for the soul of the Commonwealth, and maybe
Right.
the greater the soul of the nation. So I think it's fabulous, and I look forward to the civics projects that will be required to graduate. I think that's in a certain respect, and with all due respect to the science teachers out there, maybe knowing the molecular weight of certain items is not as important as this is going forward. So we'll have to see
No,
what
I
happens.
think that may have been a mistake in the last few decades, that STEM became all important,
Yeah.
and science, technology, engineering,
And it's very
math.
important. We don't want
And
to.
it is
I
very
don't want to get a
important.
lot of emails that I'm downplaying that.
But at
this
the
issue
same
is-
time, history, civics, English, literature, all of those things are also very important.
it's part of critical thinking in a modern global economy and world. So.
And that's one of the things that's so severely lacking, both in our leaders and in our general population. The capacity for critical and analytical thinking has kind of gone by the wayside, and is one of those things that has been debased as, why do we need that?
Yeah, I agree.
And yet it's so very, very important, whether it's at the local level for Wakefield, or whether it's at the national level or international level.
Yeah. No, I think it's a great step in the right direction, and I do give the legislature credit for taking the time to draft this and to be pretty pretty specific in what they wanted here, and to put this through in a tough time. That it was, they had a lot of things going on. It's always a race to the finish up there. The budget wasn't done,
Right.
as
usual.
As usual, but there was some time spent on this to promote the next generation, and to help give them the tools, and probably teach us a little bit too along the way. So I think it's great, and I look forward to talking and working with the young people on this, and certainly supporting the schools and being part of that whole effort, as I think my entire town council does, because I think this is something that's very near and dear and important to them.
This is a subject that has no party,
Exactly.
that has no philosophical proponent on one side or the other.
Yeah.
This is one that everyone can benefit from, that everyone can use as an everyday
Absolutely.
tool,
Absolutely.
And it doesn't matter whether it's town meeting or town council meetings or school committee meetings, but just in the everyday intercourse downtown, running into somebody, and maybe there's a hot button issue right now, and you talk about it a little bit, and hopefully the two of you come away still friendly to each other and a little more knowledgeable on either side, or on both sides of what's going on.
It's certainly okay to disagree, because maybe we'll agree on the next issue.
Sometimes the
Yeah.
disagreements end up with something better.
Yeah, they do. And I
know?
think that the other thing is I talked to myself about this, and I talked to my council members about this over the years, is that don't let your position on a single issue define you completely. Because sometimes if someone else is not going to agree, and I'm talking about, things in the budget, or they're all priorities. What do we want? Don't allow that to define you, and don't let other people define you that way, and don't define yourself that way. So it's hard. It's hard, and I've seen a lot of very talented people get very caught up in that. But that's an important point, and hopefully something like this will kind of help out.
Right.
I hope everybody can get behind this one in any way.
And as we come up toward the end here, I do want to make mention of one thing in particular, and that is Mark Sardella's column of July 19th, in which he talked about the really, truly poisonous atmosphere of that town council meeting earlier that week, and his appeal for civility, his appeal for instead of throwing verbal Molotov cocktails, to get involved in the process and to maybe make it better.
Right.
And hopefully people will talk along those lines instead of, some of the nonsense that goes on Facebook, on the community page and things like that, where everybody's out to basically beat up on everyone else.
Yeah, we're much better when we talk to each other and we kind of come to a consensus. And sometimes that happens, sometimes it isn't, and not everyone's going to get everything that they want.
Right.
But hopefully everyone will get a little bit, and we move forward.
But if it serves the greater good, that's really what.
Exactly.
That's the purpose of government.
Exactly.
At the end of the day.
Yeah.
And I would ask the audience also, if you have ideas, if you have thoughts, please send a note to Steve's office,
My
send a
office,
note to
any of the town council,
the,
school committee members,
Human Rights
WCAT,
Committee.
Human Rights.
Yep.
People are all trying in their way to make our community, our local community, our more regional community, our town, our state, our country a little bit better.
Right.
And I think if we all talk to each other, and maybe we can't do A, but we can do B with some of A in it.
Right.
And we can do, so there's always that chance.
Well, and here's the challenge for the audience too. There are always committees, boards in town that are looking for people to come on and work and help. Be a part of it. Don't be outside of it.
And
Be a part of it.
non-town appointed committees and boards too. Wakefield Center Neighborhood Association
Right.
does wonderful work downtown. Friends of Lake Quannapowitt, the Wakefield the Events Planning Committee,
Right.
Which is independent. Main Streets Group, Merchants Group, other
ACE.
neighborhood groups. ACE.
Yep.
The
Yep.
Indian Cultural
to work
Exchange.
on the artist
On the
district.
art- yeah.
Yeah.
So there's all these ways to get involved and way to help out. So
Sure.
please do. Where the more people get involved, the better we are.
Absolutely. Steve, we've run out of time
We've run
again
out of
this month.
Time to get those growlers.
Thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you next month.
Thank you.